Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ask an Atheist. I'm your host, Ethan, Micheal, aka your friendly neighborhood atheist. I hope everyone's doing well, and let's just I can't talk right now. Jump right into our interview with our guest for the evening, Drew Bekius. Drew, how you doing?
Hey, so good, Ethan. Thank you so much for having me on. Really excited to be here.
Well, I saw you on the fundraiser, and I immediately found after I saw it, I pinged Secular Rarity. I'm like, dude, you got to get me in touch with this guy. I got to have him on.
Which isn't Secular Rarity just the best?
Yeah, he
He's
is,
so
dude. He's a
amazing.
great
Yeah.
dude.
And he's in everything. It's
He is
incredible.
everywhere. He has his hands in everything.
All of it. Yes. But no, it's really good to be on here though. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. I appreciate your time. Tell me a little bit, give me a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a lot that could be said. Kind of a high level overview, I suppose we could say. My story in a lot of ways goes back to when I was a teenager. It goes back to high school. So I was kind of a serious teenager. Actually, I was super, super serious, way too serious than I had any business being. I had to make up for it.
At all?
What's that?
Like you didn't joke around at all?
No, I joked around a bit, but I was all about ministry, and had to make up for it later in life, in my 30s. And believe me, I definitely made up for it. But yeah, no, I was super serious. Was all about ministry. Was all about Jesus and God stuff and church world and all those things. I actually started my first Christian ministry at the age of 16. And
wait,
from
no
there
shit, you started your own?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No, it's wild. It was wild. So yeah, very serious, like I said. So from there started preaching at the age of 17 on Sunday morning to the whole church and all that good stuff. When Billy Graham, the good reverend, came to Minnesota, came to the Metrodome in the late 90s, I was on staff. So yeah, all of this is a high schooler and so much more that could be said. All that to say, I was all about ministry. It was what I lived and what I breathed and everything that I was interested in. And so it only made sense that that after high school, packed up everything I owned and left my central Minnesota roots behind, small town, and went to the big city of Chicago, which I believe you are also in the Chicago area. Did I catch that right?
Correct.
On one of your
Chicago
shows?
and suburbs.
Okay. And so I was in Chicago, right in the city for most of 20 years, a little bit of suburban life, but mostly right in the city. Was there. Yeah. And then I picked up a couple theology degrees, pastored a couple churches. And that takes us about 15 years into ministry. Everything was going great. I absolutely loved it. I loved my faith. I loved being a pastor. It's in many ways everything I ever wanted to do in life. And then wouldn't you know it, as great as everything was, then it all just started to fall apart. And we can delve into details. Sounds like we might delve into a bunch of details here later, so we can certainly delve into this a whole lot more. But just to keep it a little high level here as we kick it off, I loved my faith, and I just found myself unable to believe after about 15 years of ministry. Okay. And I fought for my faith. I loved my faith and wanted desperately to keep it. I was one of these prayer without ceasing type fuckers. And so I was literally praying all day, every day. Every day I wake up, I take a knee before the throne of God and ask him, what shall I sacrifice today? How might I find more joy in life today? What do you want me to do? Every decision before you, Lord. He was my everything. And now it's all falling apart. And so I'm like, how do I repiece this together? I'm upgrading my prayer life. I'm upgrading my spiritual disciplines, all these things. And yet it still just fell more and more apart. And so then finally, after a 2-year battle fighting for my faith, after about 2 years, then I said, you know what, as a last-ditch effort, maybe I just need to leave ministry as a last-ditch effort of trying to rekindle my faith, rejuvenate my faith, thinking that, well, if maybe I'm spending all this time, focusing, laboring over the souls of others. Maybe I just need more time to just focus on my own even more than I already am. And so I left ministry in a last-ditch effort to try and save my faith. And within about 3-4 months or so, I finally came to admit to myself that I had, yes, indeed, become an
atheist.
And so from there, then it was, I oftentimes say that the process, the experience of deconversion, only the first half of it is actually then losing or walking away from your faith. Then it's this whole second half of it of rebuilding from there. And so there began the next, 12, 13 years that followed to get me to here, where it started off with just lots of just work of discovery, of exploration, of trying to figure out, how do I rebuild my life after faith, after ministry, after God stuff. For the first 2 years, I didn't know of a single other pastor or minister who had walked away from the faith. I was the only one I knew. And after 2 years, in 2014, I came across the Clergy Project, which, for anyone who might not be aware of the Clergy Project, it's a nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit organization that provides services to religious leaders around the world who no longer believe in God stuff, who no longer believe in supernaturalism. And it provides them services such as peer support, community resourcing, career transition assistance. And so I discovered them, joined them, started being a participant in the Clergy Project, and over the next few years then served as communications director and then as president and director. And so I did that for a few years. Fast forward to today, really what I've spent the last decade plus focusing on, apart from my regular day job stuff, is using every spare moment I can find, every spare Saturday or Sunday or weekend or every spare moment I can find, trying to connect with folks who are also on the other side of faith as we try and navigate what these next steps look like in terms of post-faith lifestyle, if you want to call it, alignment, if you want to call it. A big part of that is humanism. So I speak and do a lot within this idea and this concept of humanism. It's a big thing for me. So we can talk about that if you'd like, but that pretty much brings me here to today. And wow, shit, I don't know what to talk about. Let's go home. No.
So before I jump into my first question, I just want to share a random fact, and this person wouldn't mind me sharing it as long as I don't use their name, but I know someone in the Clergy Project. They are a priest, and you're never going to believe where I met this person. My girlfriend and I met this person at a swingers event.
Did you? Yes. I absolutely do believe that, actually. So
really? Because it's so hard to believe.
Well, something you find, is you talk about deconstruction. Something we see a lot of, it's very common actually, is when we hear a lot, we talk a lot, just around us, whatever, today, if you want to say, is the theological deconstruction. Even theists talk about how they deconstruct the wrong theology and then reconstruct the right theology. Even they talk about, it's very trendy these days, talk about deconstruction. That said, when we're talking about deconstructing to the point of non-belief, oftentimes deconstructing our theology is only the first of many things that we deconstruct and then begin the work of reconstructing from there. Oftentimes it's beyond theology, it's our sense of ethics. What is right and wrong? What does that mean? Deconstruct what we used to think were the worst sins and reconstructing what now ethical living actually looks like. Deconstructing relationships, deconstructing politics for a lot of folks. And a big one is deconstructing monogamy, deconstructing relationships in general, but deconstructing monogamy. And so it's very common for post-faith folk to start exploring with what does non-ethical forms of non-monogamy look like. So you mentioned a swingers club. Yeah, hey, I'm not surprised at all.
Okay, so to my first question, Can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing and what got you into religion so hardcore?
Yeah, great question. There's a lot that could be said. I suppose maybe the biggest thing, I don't know that oftentimes people assume it's your parents, right? That's the assumption.
That's what
Well,
I assume too.
yeah, right. And maybe that was the case for yourself. For me, it wasn't so much that. Actually, my parents got more involved with church the more I did. But for me, the big thing was I really struggled as a kid, elementary school, junior high, especially, but and to a lesser degree in high school, with finding friends. I was I had a really hard time building friendships and was kind of an outcast. I was a lost sheep, if you will, and I just felt completely alone and isolated. But
Oh,
the church youth group is what took me in and helped
okay.
me experience community, helped me feel accepted for the first time in my life. Really, all the way through my teenage years, the only place of acceptance I ever found was in youth group. So that's what
Okay.
pulled me in. How
Yeah,
about for yourself? Did you? Yeah.
I was never really uh I was more politically brainwashed, not as much religiously. I was a Christian, my family believed in Jesus, they believed in God, but there was never really a we had to go to church. I did go to a Catholic junior high, but I never really, while I believed in God, I was never like a hardcore believer. I tried reading the Bible and I was bored out of my mind. So I couldn't do it. And I'd see Bible bangers and I'm like, God, what are you guys so obsessed with? Like I didn't understand it. But pretty much most of my life I was a believer. With that being said, what motivated you to want to start your own ministry?
Yeah, well, that's another great question. And again, there's a lot that could be said.
Say it all, my
You
friend.
know,
This is your
I,
platform right now.
you know, I didn't think I ever would. I At one point, kind of less than a year before I started it, I didn't think there was any way I could ever do something like that. I didn't have friends the way it was, but I felt the Lord pulling at me, tugging
Okay.
at me to do more for my faith, to do more, to say more, to be more for my faith. But I was like, but I can't do that. I can't do that. I'm already ostracized and a dork and a loser. There's no way I could jeopardize what little chance I have at friendships with now also preaching at people and being all crazy and stuff, even if my theology supported it. I just didn't have it in me. And there was the youth group. This is the summer after eighth grade, the summer before ninth grade high school. And they were going to a conference in Washington, D.C. called DCLA 94, or at least the DC part of DCLA 94. And it was billed as a peer evangelism super conference. They're bringing in all the hot dog bands and speakers and all this stuff. And the whole thing was, you're going to come, you're going to spend a week here, and you're going to be basically trained up to be an evangelist superpower in your local high school. And so I'm going, I know this is the whole point of this week-long trip, but really I was just going for the vacation. I wasn't going to become turned into a Marvel, Jesus hero, whatever. But before the trip, I'm praying to God, to the Lord. And I'm like, God, I know you probably want me to go and learn all this stuff, but I just don't think I ever could. And I said, but I dare you, if it's possible, I dare you to unleash something in me that convinces me to come back and just become a whirlwind for Christ, whatever. Guess what, Ethan? My prayers were answered. Okay, I went and I got the Spirit, and oh my gods, all the shit they were pumping us full of, I absorbed it all. And I was like, okay, Lord. And I came back and I started my Christian ministry in my public high school. going to bring the Lord into our public high school and declare it his territory. And so we started off with Bible studies and prayer groups. And then eventually in my junior year, we started, worship gatherings right there in the band room on Tuesday mornings, declaring it his territory. And so, yeah, anyway, that's how that started. Would you have come, Ethan? I just want to know, in high school, would you have come and hung out with us?
No.
Oh, shit.
Excuse me.
Wow.
I did go to, that was the other thing I forgot to say. I did go to youth group in like 6th and 7th grade, but the only reason I actually went is because the guy who ran the youth group let me watch wrestling on one of the TVs.
Okay.
So I got to do that. And then once he stopped it, I stopped going to youth group because I wasn't feeling it. I could never get into the Bible. It was so boring. I was a believer and I kind of just left it at that. Like, yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, I believe. Yes, I believe in heaven and hell, the soul, all the basic stuff. But I was never truly hardcore.
Well, that's the beautiful. There's room with the Lord, even for those who aren't hardcore. Okay, you believe, that's all right. One big happy family. Okay.
All right, we got our first question. Question for Drew: did you read the full Bible while you were a pastor or as a teen?
Oh yes, multiple times. I read the entire thing as a teenager, a couple times, and then actually preached and taught all the way through the whole damn thing as a pastor. So yeah, we're very much focused on teaching. When we would the practice in our type of tradition, our type of church, was you would actually preach through the Bible to help eliminate bias, or at least fight against it. Because like the worst thing is to cherry pick, right? Like, are you really teaching this thing or not? Do you really believe it or not? And so, yeah, we teach and preach and read, study the whole thing.
Did that in any way contribute to the deconstruction of you becoming an atheist?
Yes, later. Okay, well, but this might be helpful. So I very quickly found myself on the much more progressive side of evangelical Christianity, which, raise your hand if progressive evangelicalism sounds like an oxymoron. Okay, but so yeah. So, but if you define evangelicalism, if you define the evangelical Christian church as kind of the litmus test is whatever the hell the Bible says, whatever it says, it's truth. Whatever it says, it's inerrant, it's flawless. Whatever it says, it's from God. That, I would suggest, is what ultimately puts you within evangelicalism. That said, as long as you believe it's actually from God, you can interpret it pretty much however you want to. And there's room for great discussion and debate over what it actually means, what the authors actually intended to communicate. And so within that, in that sense, I was an evangelical. I believed all the way up to the very end. And even when I was fighting for my faith, at least the type of faith I was fighting for was continuing to believe that it was the inspired, inerrant word of God. The progressive part, though,
that's what confuses me.
Within that framework of believing that whatever the hell it says, it's the inspired, inerrant, authoritative word of God, the way we interpreted it was about as far left as you can go in just about everything. Okay, so we believed that that capitalism was evil. Okay, I taught that that God holds the leaders of every country, every nation responsible for making sure they equally distribute all wealth within the borders. And that the only reason why the church was called upon to help meet the needs of the impoverished, etc., is because governmental leaders fucking failed at every turn to actually meet the needs of their people. And so things like that and pretty much everything else, I felt the freedom, the Spirit of God was within me. I would read it and I would say, okay, well, this could mean A, B, C, or D, X, Y, C, or Z. It could mean any of those things, but I'm looking at it and Lord, this feels like if I read X, Y, and Z about the background, I was all about ancient archaeology. I was all about Mesopotamia. I read all the ancient Near Eastern stuff, and I felt full freedom. I was well aware that the stuff that the Bible said about Jesus had already been said in all these other religions. I believed that God used the teachings of other religions and the fact that the culture already thought of those things as divine, that he said, okay, since they already think of the Son of God as a divine figure, because of that, I'm going to basically make that happen for real, because they would already understand it to be divine. Right. So I took all these things and basically looked at it and said, Lord within me, Holy Spirit within me, am I understanding this correctly? Does this actually mean this version of interpretation rather than what these Republican fucks are saying? And over and over again, I would look at it and I would feel, on occasion, I'd feel like, no, I don't know that that's right. Keep looking, or I'd feel a tension. And so I wasn't sure. Okay, well, Lord, when the time is right, help me find the real answer and release this tension within me. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. But I was very comfortable with the gray of life. I actively preached against black and white thinking, okay? Because if it was so black and white, then the whole church would agree. The fact that we don't shows it's not black and white. We need to embrace the gray. We need to embrace the patience of God with relying on him to confirm it within us when it is time to be confirmed. And the fact that nobody can agree on this shit is further confirmation that it's not time for us to agree on it. And we need to embrace the gray. I know I'm kind of going all over the place here.
Please continue.
But all of that is where throughout most of my ministry, this is the type of thing I taught. One of my favorite things, side note, to preach on was the use of contextual curse words, swear words, obscene words that were not acceptable in the day that they were written. They were considered foul language, and yet they're found throughout the Bible. And so I would one of my favorite things to preach and teach on is swear words in the Bible. And
can you give me an example?
Let's see. It's been a little while. So there's, I forget what the word is, but in the Hebrew Bible, in the Christian Old Testament, there's a word that basically translates to bastard, and rather than using a more cleanly word or just bastard, it's a word that specifically in that time and culture was incredibly offensive. And yet that incredibly offensive word is the Hebrew word that was chosen rather than more family-friendly alternatives. There's some in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. I'd have to take time to dig back into them. But yeah, my office assistant referred to me as a pastor whose favorite word is fuck. So on the more progressive side of things, I was, for those who might be familiar with such terms as the emerging church or the emergent church, or at the time what was called the evangelical left. That was me. That's where I felt at home. But then eventually there came a point where I started seeing things on a deeper level within the original manuscripts that I just couldn't reconcile. And that's what ultimately started pulling things apart even more. So
I hope I didn't miss this. But did you say you were always a progressive Christian, or was there a point in your life where you were a conservative Christian?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, there was a point where it started to shift. So I grew up more kind of your typical cotton candy mainstream evangelical is how I was raised in my home. My parents weren't super into church. My dad didn't really go at all when I was super young. They started getting involved more throughout my teenage years. And so with that, it was more, just kind of cotton candy, middle of the road evangelical, My youth pastor at one point is like, "Why are you reading Leviticus?" And he mocked me for reading parts of the Bible. My youth pastor, right? So it was just kind of whatever, cotton candy, whatever. But my grandfather, he was two things. He was the greatest influence on my faith. He was the one who shaped my faith in my teenage years and childhood more than anybody else. And he was very far right. He was a fundamentalist. He encouraged me. He said, "I really would encourage you to take caution in not going off to Bible college, because I've seen way too many amazing pastors go off to Bible college and then they get liberalized, and it liberalizes Jesus right out of them and they lose their faith." And I told my grandpa, I said, "Grandpa, if the Spirit of God is truly in me, then any education I receive can only strengthen my faith, not tear it apart." Well, assuming that, notice the if was if the Spirit of God is truly in me, right? Unfortunately, there isn't one. So, or at least that's what I currently believe. But so then where I went to school, I went to the Moody Bible Institute, which is kind of, they consider themselves like the flagship of global evangelicalism. You can't be it's non-denominational, but you can't be a Catholic to go there. You have to be, I don't think you can be Orthodox either. You have to be some form of Protestant Christianity. You have to have been, Bible believing, accept Jesus into your heart. So more typical evangelical in a lot of ways. My undergrad, I did 2 degrees at Moody. Undergrad just firmed that up all the more, kind of just middle of the road. What you see is what you get, typical evangelical.
Mm-hmm.
But then I went to grad school, Moody Graduate School, Moody Seminary, for a 2nd degree for my Master of Divinity. So it's part of the same empire, if you will, same campus, but now it's graduate school. And it was at graduate school where my mind was blown. Okay, they still read the Bible the same way. The theology was pretty much exactly the same, but the way they applied it was totally different. The way they applied it there, it was at Moody Graduate School, Moody Theological Seminary, where I was first encouraged to vote Democrat. There were at least 3 professors there who encouraged. I remember Dr. Green standing up and saying, "I'm not sure I see any of the heartbeat of Jesus in the Republican Party. I see it all over the Democratic side. Feeding the poor, looking out for the impoverished, looking out for the foreign-born." He goes, "You cannot be a biblical Christian without having a heartbeat and actively caring and putting systems in place to care for the foreign-born and the impoverished, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." Anyway, so that's where I started shifting. One of my professors who had the greatest impact on me, he gave us emerging church. That was, again, for those, if you know, I guess, emerging church type books that we read, things like that. And so that all kind of pulled me towards the more progressive side. And then that's where I stayed throughout the rest of my ministry and my faith.
So to get a little off topic, you're a confident, well-spoken, convincing speaker. Right? I could see why you were a pastor. No, you are.
Take it with a grain of salt. Who knows what the fuck I'm saying?
So let me ask you this, because I've been dying to ask someone this question, and I haven't gotten around to asking any of my friends yet. But a member of my family is pushing very hard Christianity onto my 8-year-old nephew. And I'm at a loss, and I'm trying, and I don't know how to deal with it. I really don't. And I don't, I've always kept my nephew away from my streams, because to me, he's too young. I don't want him just being an atheist because his uncle's an atheist. So what advice could you give me on how I could either best educate him or talk to someone in my family about this?
Excellent question. One thing, maybe you said this, but if you did, I apologize, I missed it. So you're believing, I think you said sibling, brother or sister or someone who is a believer and pressing their faith.
It's not my brother. It's someone close to my brother.
Someone close to your
But my
brother.
brother is now becoming a believer.
And your brother's becoming a believer, and this same person is the one who is influencing your nephew, right?
Yes.
So it's not your brother
meals.
it's the brother's friend. That okay.
Correct.
Right? Okay. Yeah, so there's a variety of things you can, with all of this. There's no inherently right or wrong answer, right? And so it's going to be complex. It's difficult. You've got all these different levels of relationship that that you want to be mindful of. I almost said respect. You don't necessarily have to, but you want to be mindful of that, right? So thinking through things I think through in my own set of relationships, right? In terms of my heartbeat, my desire, my inclination on the one hand would be to maybe go to your nephew and say, start surrounding them with information, with books. I love, by the way, for anyone who's not aware, there's a ton of children's books that are amazing for things like this, that walk through, it's a children's book that walks through all the different types of gods and religions that are out there. And then in the process normalizes atheism as yet another option. If you don't believe in Thor and you don't believe in Zeus, maybe you also don't believe in Yahweh or Jesus, and that's okay. There's all kinds of great books. That book is called, I'd have to look. Give me a moment. I'll see if I can.
Yeah, just no problem. You can let me know in a later time.
But there's all kinds of things like that, right? And so my inclination would be: is there opportunity for me to read them these books, gift them these books? Where you want to just be mindful is: does it trigger an event where the parents, the guardians of any kid, but in your case, your brother, and if there's another parent involved, maybe them as well, and would giving them books, having these conversations, reading to them these kinds of things, would that trigger a response where then they would, put distance between you and your nephew, or even have it so that you're completely cut off from them? So then if that's the case, you'd want to say, okay, is there a more nuanced direction I can take? And is it more important that I get them resources, or is it more important that I can just be a constant trusted influence who's always allowed access? And I use these years to more build up respect and just trust with my nephew, as well as with his family, my brother, etc. And then maybe as they're adults or as they're teenagers, they see I'm different, and then now they feel comfortable to ask me questions, and that's when I'm able to truly educate and provide perspective. So I know I'm going on and on, but I am curious though, for yourself, Ethan. I would like to hear. I know I threw out a lot of different types of things. I would love to hear more about though your situation with your nephew. Do you think you would your brother think it was funny if you pulled out, we'll call it an atheist book, and started reading it or gifting it to him? What would the response be?
He would totally be okay with that.
You would? Okay.
I actually already directly asked him that. And I said, hey, yes. I said, look, I understand my nephew. I can give his name. I call him Taco. That's not his real name, but that's the nickname I call him. So I said, hey, I understand Taco is now learning a lot more about Christianity. I go, I'd love to teach him a little bit about atheism and why I don't believe. Is that okay? And he said, yeah, if that's what you want to do, absolutely, that's fine.
Okay, that's amazing. And how old did you say your nephew is?
He is 8.
8, okay. So I am looking for... Okay, and 8 years old, this is probably a great age for this book, I would think. Oh, here, okay, yes, that's right. That's what it is. It's The Belief Book by David McAfee, David G. McAfee. In some circles, he's a really well-known name, writes prolifically, mostly books written for adults, and he has a whole series of these. The Belief Book, I think there's another one called The God's Book. I'd start with The Belief Book. It's got, it's not set up where it looks like an obvious children's book. It kind of looks like just a regular book with almost like comic book pictures type things in it. So
Oh,
very
okay.
8-year-old friendly. But I'd check that out, the Belief book.
Okay. Yeah, I wrote it down.
In fact, maybe I can even drop it in the chat if you want. Should I do
yeah,
that?
go ahead. That'd be great. Oh,
Okay.
I might have to make
Or
you a
no.
moderator. I wonder if it'll allow links. But yeah, give it a shot. Try putting it in there.
Oh yeah, I tried putting it. It says the comment has failed to post. So I'm guessing
All right,
that's
put
probably
it.
why.
Do you see where it says private chat in
Yes.
StreamYard to the right? Put it in there, and then I can put the book in the chat.
All right, cool. There you go.
Awesome. Okay, so before you said you do a lot of speaking on humanism. Before we get into that, my question for you is: you said you were in Chicago for 20 years, was it?
Yeah. Yep. Just over 20 years.
Do you put ketchup on your hot dog? Know that I am going to judge you hardcore by how you answered this question.
Hell no. Okay. I won't even put it on my fries when in the vicinity of a hot dog. Okay.
That's great.
Hot dogs, what a desecration. I'm offended you even asked the question, quite honestly.
I had to ask because I meet people who do that and it drives me nuts.
No, for me, just I like it simple, just mustard and onions. That's all I want. I'm not quite a Chicago style guy. There's too much stuff in there.
That's still good.
Not have.
As long as you don't do ketchup.
No ketchup. Hell no. Hell no.
Oh, that makes me so happy. You just jumped.
Fight me in the chat, people. Fight me in the chat, okay? If you put ketchup on your hot dogs, you don't have good taste in food, quite honestly. You don't even know how to eat a hot dog. Jesus shit.
With that being said,
yes.
Can you define humanism or secular humanism?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's the thing with humanism is there does tend to be a lot of different definitions. It can be whoever you talk to is they have a different way of looking at it. I like to break it up actually where there's different veins of humanism, different types of humanism. So some would see themselves, maybe the ones that folks would be most popular, the types of humanism folks would be most aware of, sound most familiar, would be what I would call what I would refer to as philosophical humanism. You have a lot of humanist groups out there, humanist communities, local chapters in different cities across the US and even beyond Canada as well, where for a lot of them, honestly, I'd refer to it more as country club humanism. It's just kind of kicking back and being cool. What I find most helpful, there's a couple different definitions I use. The one that I think is most helpful and a little shorter and more to the point is I see humanism as the concept of building a better world while living out a healthier humanity together. That's it. Building a better world while living out a healthier humanity together. It doesn't necessarily within that touch, it doesn't specify. What might surprise people the most with that definition is it doesn't specify anything about God stuff, belief or lack thereof. And that's because really since humanism first started, or at least first went by the name humanism, which is it's been about 110 years ago when the first secular group started using the term humanism. And it's a group that I work with now today. So it's actually a Minneapolis-based group, which is where I live now. And
Are you able to say the name of the group or no?
Yeah, it's called the First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis. And so the executive director or minister of that is always a non-theistic group. The community, the congregation, it's a Unitarian congregation, started off as a Darwin reading group in the late 1800s. And then eventually they joined Unitarianism, but that's because Unitarianism has always had segments of it that are 100% non-theistic. And this community has always been non-theistic. In the 1910s, the executive director or senior minister, guy by the name of John Dietrich, he started using the term humanism to describe their approach to building a better world and trying to live out a healthier humanity and doing it together as a community, as a congregation. And so that, I would argue, is one of the most historic ways to view humanism. intentionally, inherently community-based. It has always been progressive. It has always been politically progressive. It has always been socially progressive, at least traditionally. Now, of course, over time, you've had different groups segment off, and definitely not everybody who calls himself a humanist is that. Oftentimes today, humanism is used almost more or less as a synonym for atheism. I would vehemently argue against that,
I would agree with you.
humanism and atheism are not synonyms, but that's how the term oftentimes is used today. So, but inherently focused on how do we live? What are we doing to actively build a better world together? And oftentimes, so I refer to this as an embodied humanism as opposed to a philosophical humanism. It's an embodied humanism. Might start in the head, but then it filters its way down into the heart and then out into how we live. It's embodied. And we oftentimes humanist communities, especially the kind that are more of this mindset, we make whether or not you believe in God stuff is less of a focus. If we can work together progressively to actually build a better world, if we agree on separation of church and state, if we agree on not making God stuff a key point. Well, if they're not going to make God stuff a key point, then that means, right, we're not pushing God down anybody. We're agreeing that how we live is better in actually building, helping people live higher quality lives. Then who cares whether or not you believe in some sort of a wispy-washy deity out there? I don't fucking care. Right. Let's focus on what actually matters. So that's why my preferred definition of building a better world, living out a healthier humanity together mentions nothing of whether or not you do or don't believe in God stuff.
So when you go on these speaking engagements, what is your primary focus or goal of your talks?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends a little bit on what I'm speaking on. So, if I'm speaking about humanism, that's one thing. I'll come back to that in a moment. But oftentimes, though, I'm speaking on other things as well. So one thing that I speak on oftentimes is more just general atheist type stuff. It depends on who's inviting me, what it's for. For instance, I'll be at NanoCon coming up here. Those who are familiar with it, Nashville Nuns, they do a convention every few years or so in just outside Nashville called NanoCon. So I'll be there. There I'm going to be on a panel. It's called, I think, 3 ex-pastors Go See a Shrink. And so it's going to be 3 former ministers, myself, Durante Lamar, and Dave Warnock. We're going to be on a panel with someone named Janine, who is a therapist, and we're going to do sort of a group therapy session. Doesn't really have anything specifically to do about humanism. It's just about other stuff. We'll see.
That sounds like an interesting talk.
Yeah, I think it'll be great. And there, it's a panel, so I'm not bringing with a talk prepared. We're just going to go and have some fun and talk about some cool shit, I think. I do on occasion like to talk about human sexuality. That is one of my favorite topics to talk about. And that's probably the one I speak on the least. But on occasion, folks will have me come out and do a talk or be on a panel about monogamy, non-monogamy, human sexuality, things like that. So that's on occasion. Some of my YouTube episodes focus on human sexuality as well. But when it comes to humanism, you ask, what is the main thing I try and I want to get out of it, the purpose. Right. What's my goal? My goal is to help people live more intentionally, really, when it comes right down to it. One of the things I do a lot with groups, with humanist groups and others, is we think through, maybe we're able to look back with some bit of ease, though a lot of discomfort nonetheless, and think about, we know what our values and what our ethics were when we were in the faith, when we were in the church. And we look at it and we're like, yeah, that was bullshit. But what's my sense of ethics now? What are my values now, this side of faith? How do I think through those values and sense of ethics and then apply them to my life and live more intentionally? And so that can go in a lot of different ways. And when we do this, when I do a lot of workshops and stuff as well, when we do these, whether it's a workshop format, whether it's a talk, a monologue, my goal isn't so much to tell you what you should believe or what values you should embrace. That's not my goal at all. I don't even try and do that. Okay. They might come across what my values and ethics are, and I share them oftentimes. But that's not the point. The point is to help you, to empower you to think through what your sense of ethic is, what you value most, what your highest priorities are in life, and to then think through, how can I live more intentionally in the way I do this? Building a better world, living out a healthier humanity, or whatever your sense of ethic might lead you towards. So that's my big goal. How do we live differently as we embody our humanism or whatever our ethics might incline us towards?
Okay. Since you said you didn't get to speak on human sexuality much, I'd love to dive more into that topic.
Sure. Yeah.
Sex is comes up on my channel a lot. I used to host a weekly podcast with Hannah Vaughn where we talked about sex, dating, and relationships. I am in an ethical, non-monogamous relationship. So let's talk a little bit about that. What do you like to speak on, or what do you primarily focus on when you talk about human sexuality?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so a lot of it is one thing I find fascinating is this idea of, and it can go, I mean, the different kinds of things I am invited to speak on, or the subject matter of different shows, it varies widely. It goes, so just to give you kind of an overarching, it goes from, purity culture to embracing a non-traditional masculinity or a non-toxic masculinity. I consider myself non-traditional. I think I feel pretty masculine, but it's a non-traditional form of masculinity. Actually, there's this whole backstory about how for many years throughout my entire childhood and teen years, I was very uncomfortable in my masculinity. I actually kind of saw myself as not masculine at all. I avoided masculinity. There was a period of time where I kind of when I was a pastor, actually, remember I was more progressive. As a pastor, I intentionally over-embellished what you might consider my feminine side from the pulpit in order to help normalize a more feminine version of maleness or masculinity or whatever it is. If I had the terminology back then, I probably would have described myself as non-binary. It was after I deconverted and then became divorced, and it was through my deconversion experience that I said, I will never again be fully monogamous ever. I will never commit to that ever again. Because I came to see that for most people, my view, though there are exceptions, some people are asexual. Some people are monogamous. There's a wide tent to this thing we call humanity. Absolutely. But that for most of humanity, monogamy is forced and not natural. It's only because of religion and the patriarchy that society forces it upon us. And so I promise I will never follow that bullshit again, or at least not force myself to. Now, there's situational monogamy. Absolutely. I've embraced that at different times, but I will never again be forced to. And so I talk about those but through that process of then dating and exploring all of this, I tapped into and discovered very much this aggression within me. And in this discovery of this aggression within me, I found this version of masculinity that I embraced, but I still would not describe it as a traditional masculinity. So I like to talk about that at times. Sometimes it is specifically about, I've been on a panel a time or two about different forms where different people represented different types of non-monogamy. I don't see myself as explicitly poly. Poly open, I guess. That's how I've described myself at times, poly open. Or monogamish is another term that I use to describe myself. But it's just being open to life and to what is around us, and helping other people go through that same deconstruction process of what monogamy must mean or does mean, and helping us find what is both respectful to our partners, what is respectful to the individuals around us, what is respectful to ourselves, and finding a balance of relationships, however that might look in various situations.
So I'm going to ask you a very just direct, blunt question, and
Yeah,
by no means do you have to answer it. Are
sure.
you in an ethical, non-monogamous relationship currently, or are you in a monogamous relationship?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. It's a great question, and I told you earlier. I mean, any questions, feel free. I'm an open book guy, and this stuff's all over the fucking internet anyway. Um, but yeah, no. I mean, right now, like I said, I see myself. A word I used earlier was monogamish. I mean, it kind of more or less looks and acts for the most part monogamously, or at least that's how it
Okay.
looks. The big thing is I would never, you know, I'm never going to commit to, one lifelong relationship forever.
Okay.
But it's looking for what makes sense and respecting the partners that you have. For instance, it's no secret to a lot of folks. I'm engaged. I'm getting married. I am so committed to her. I love
Congrats.
her and want to honor that with all the different ways that can look in the future. But I think that it's essentially a monogamish relationship that I'm in. So, and I'm very committed to it.
Awesome. And for those that don't know, I did interview his fiance Stacy with, I believe it was 3 weeks ago. So yeah, check out that interview. It was a good one. You brought up toxic masculinity, and I know
Yeah.
a slew of Christians who will vehemently deny that there's no such thing as toxic masculinity.
Sure.
Can you define that for us, and how is it prevalent in our society?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And I love definitions. I'm a definition nerd. Okay. Um, I'm always thinking, well, how would I define this? How would I define that? How would I define this? How would I define that? When it comes to toxic man, I hope this doesn't feel like a cop out, but it's gonna be broad. And that's because I think the ways in which toxicity can seep in to life, to social dynamics, is incredibly broad. And it feels like it's always ever expanding. So I would take a very broad angle in defining it and just say any form of masculinity, which is one subsection of any form of humanity, really. I mean, toxic humanity. I do think any form of humanity can be toxic. There can be toxic femininity. There can be toxic humanity in many forms. And yes, there can be toxic masculinity. And so I think, when you look at specifically, though, masculinity itself, it's, am I exercising my masculinity, my sense of sex and gender? And I, for these purposes, more or less clump them together. For these purposes, do I apply and outwork and live out my concept of my own sex and gender in a way that is hurtful or harmful towards other people, towards individuals around me? And I'm going to broaden it. I just said, I specified a little bit towards individuals, people around me. But even now, my brain is immediately saying, wait a minute, that's too tight, that's too strict, that's too narrow. Because guess what? I can also harm myself, not just the people around me, but also myself. I can also harm other people that aren't around me, right? So it's again, broadening it out even more. It's just harmful expressions, harmful understandings, harmful concepts of how I see my own and other the sex and expressions of sex and gender, understandings of sex and gender in the world around us. I don't know. Again, very, very shifting.
That's fine.
But it is broad. Yeah.
Well, we got through all the normal atheist stuff. I got a couple more questions though for you. So for one, what is for two questions actually. One, where do you fall on the political spectrum? Have you finalized yourself at progressive, socialist, Democrat, liberal? And then also, what is your opinion on today's political climate?
Yeah, great questions. So, let's say this, in just about every issue out there, I am about as far left as you can possibly go. So whether you call that progressive, yes, I embrace progressive. I view progressive as a subset of liberalism. Therefore, I also consider myself a liberal. I consider myself, at least to some degree, a leftist. I say that carefully because the term carries a lot of baggage. I just prefer to say that on pretty much every issue out there, I'm as far left as you can go. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And then what's your opinion on today's political climate? You know, Donald Trump, RFK, everything. Fans.
It's heartbreaking. It's infuriating. It's terrifying. It is about, how many more, I was going to say expletive, not expletive, but large words can we say, right? I mean, infuriating, terrifying, heartbreaking. It's just, it's all of it. And yeah, I guess I'll just, unless you have a more specific question, I'll leave it at that for now. I mean, I'm very much anti-Trump.
That's what I was going to ask.
Oh, absolutely, emphatically anti-Trump. He's an absolute. So many things. Wannabe dictator would be one of them.
He is. He really is. And my entire family, almost all of them, are big Trump supporters. Yeah. So I'm looked at as the black sheep in my family.
Yeah. It's just, it's I grew up in a space. I grew up in a space that looked at the U.S. maybe surely naively, at least to some degree, loving the U.S., loving being a USer, okay, a United Statesian, an American, I guess we could call it. Loving that and seeing so much freedom and pride. I wasn't always necessarily someone that waved. I was never a big flag waver. Okay?
I was.
Were you? Yeah.
The 4th of July. Every 4th of July, I'd open my sunroof. I'd plant that American flag there and have it flying outside my sunroof. I was as conservative as you can get, but I was still always very pro-gay rights. That was something I always spoke towards, despite being a Republican.
Absolutely. I was a Republican in my early adulthood. I shed that pretty quickly, kind of along the line with the grad school story I mentioned earlier, which was during George W. Bush's second term is when I shifted to the left side and everything. No, I never saw the U.S. as being in a perfect state of anything, and always saw it as being full of injustice, corruption, all of these things. But I also, though, saw in place the types of structures that would allow us to generate real change. I've always seen progress as incremental. I've always valued negotiation. I've never seen a way where you can really change anything substantively by demanding that the other half just follow you blindly. There's always going to be negotiation. You're never going to get your entire agenda across.
Right.
So I've always been a far left folk that views negotiation and give and take as just part of the progress of making actual change happen. Because we can demand complete change all we want to, but if we never get there, we're not going to get there. But anyway, so that's kind of where some would maybe look at that and say that makes me more of a moderate. I don't know, but what I'm actually arguing for, working towards in the bigger picture, is on the far left. But yeah, anyway. But I've always seen the potential building blocks in place where, if we're strategic, we can actually make real change. And as you look over time, I would suggest that we have seen, at least up until, a decade ago, that we have seen incremental change in just about everything.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
so, and we need to keep working for that. I think one of the biggest problems is those on the left. We are not nearly as strategic as those on the right. And because the right is so much more strategic and measured and forceful, because they're all of these things, they're getting the upper hand in everything right now. And which leads to the heartbreaking part of what I said a few minutes ago. But
yeah, we need someone to unify the left better, is what we need. And who knows if that's going to happen.
No, we do. Yeah.
Question from our audience, from Sven. Question for Drew. Do you hold any dualistic ideas post-deconstruction, or are you completely convinced by materialism?
That's a good question. I appreciate that. I missed who it was that asked it. Was it Sven?
Sven, yes.
Yeah. So Sven, I appreciate that. So I would concede that there's so much we don't know. There's so much mystery in the world around us. And yet, at the same time, for all practical purposes, yeah, I'm a materialist. I'm a naturalist. I'm not a supernaturalist. As far as I can tell so far, pretty much anything there is to know seems to be discoverable through natural scientific means. That said, I'm not in any need to create answers we don't have yet. I'm very comfortable, kind of like I said, when I was a minister, avoid black and white thinking and embrace the gray. I can embrace the gray in this now too. I don't know everything. We don't need to know everything. Maybe we'll find stuff out in the future. Maybe we'll find out that there's some other layer that's not observable naturally or that isn't material, but then we'll never actually find that out for sure, will we? Because it's not observable scientifically. So I don't know, maybe not. So far, everything I've seen though has done nothing to convince me whatsoever. I've only seen things to convince me of a material, natural world. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, it made sense to me, and I would agree with you. Okay, so I got to ask you this. The posters on your wall, are those some of your favorite movies, or just you got some posters?
Yeah, no, these are a number of my favorite films. I love movies and film and all of that when I was a wee lad, okay? And I had no friends. I filled my time devouring film and television to some degree, but really film and movies. I love them. I've never been much for sports. I hear sports data goes in one ear and out the other. I hear about things like cars and what goes in one ear and out the other. My mind doesn't hold on to any of those traditionally masculine things. But movies and film, oh, those are my friends. Oh, those are my parables for living. I used film as metaphors, illustrations all the time in my preaching and teaching and things like that. But yeah, so these are among my favorite films. I wouldn't say there's 9 posters back here. I would not be so along the line to say that these are my 9 favorite. There are others I like more than these, but I couldn't find the posters. But that's okay. But they're all among my favorites. Yes.
All right. So
how about you? You like movies too, I guess.
I love movies and TV shows. I repeatedly binge watch so much stuff. I probably too much. I should spend more time reading and less time watching TV and movies. With that being said, what are your top 3 movies and top 3 TV shows?
Oh, okay. Great question. So from a technical standpoint, it is part of my deal. I always refuse to be so crass as to pick a top 3, period. Okay. But, and it's because they're always shifting. I don't know. I like them all for different reasons. Okay.
Right.
That said though, 3 of my favorite, oh man. So one of my favorites would have to be Magnolia. One of my favorites would have to be I love No Country for Old Men is another favorite of mine. I love
Good
The
movie.
Shining. Okay, well,
Oh,
there's
great
the
movie.
first three I said. The Shining, fantastic.
Did
What did I
you
say?
like
Shining,
Doctor
No
Sleep?
Country for Old Men, and what's that?
Did you like
Doctor.
Doctor Sleep, the sequel to The Shining?
Yeah, it was good. It was enjoyable. I mean, it was nowhere on the same par, but it was enjoyable. What'd you think?
I thought it was really fucked up. Like
Like
when
terribly done, or what do you mean?
no. It was.
Okay.
I loved the movie. I thought it was
Yeah.
great, but like when they were doing that thing to the kid, it was like, dude, I was literally cringing. Like, oh my god, I've never in a movie seen a child have that happen to them. So it was, for me, it was very jarring and very like turned my stomach. But love the movie.
No, it's intense. It's intense. I just saw it the once. I've been wanting to see it again, but so far I've just seen it once. The Shining I've seen dozens of times. I don't even know.
Yeah, it's a great film.
Yeah.
All right,
So-
and then my last question is your top 3 favorite TV shows, or 3 of some of your favorite.
So I think I'd have to say Breaking Bad. I mean, Breaking Bad probably is my favorite TV.
I've never seen it.
Oh, you've never seen it?
Never seen it.
Fam, you have to see Breaking Bad.
I've heard. Everyone tells me how great it is.
Oh, so good. So just keep in mind, the first 2 to 3 seasons sometimes lose people. It's a little bit slower pace. Just keep in mind, it's all investing for the future. And once you get to season 4, and then 5A and 5B, it's basically 2 seasons in one, 5A and 5B. I mean, then once you get to the end of season 3, you're hooked, and it'll just pull you deeper and deeper and deeper all the way in. Fantastic. But then another one of my favorites is Californication. Love that with Duchovny.
Haven't seen it either.
Oh, so good, so good. I would love to watch it a second time, but when I saw it, it was on Netflix years ago, and now I think it's on Showtime or something now. I don't know, but yeah, I would love to watch it a second time. It's so fucking good. Third one, I don't know. I'll say definitely not Friends. Definitely not Friends. I'll just say that.
Wait.
Yeah.
You don't like Friends?
No. It's good. Friends is good.
Oh, okay.
I only said that because some very annoying people in my life, it's their favorite show. So
yeah, it's one of my favorite shows of all time. It's not. I'll admit, it's not like the greatest written show ever. There's shows that are superior to it, but
no, it is really good. It is really good. I'm just trying to pick very intentional, specific fights in the comments, which is successful. So, but no, it is good. It is good. I enjoy Friends.
All right, before we get out of here, I got one last question for you from Ways to Human. Since Drew loves top threes, LOL, Drew, what are your favorite 3 musical artists, bands/singers? You look like a country music guy, so I'm curious. You do. I feel like you would like country music.
I am not a country music guy, okay? The same lame ass influences in my life that think I should idolize Friends are also trying to sway me towards country music. And it's just, I'm not having it. Okay. Some of it's okay, but no,
very little, small amount.
Yeah. So no, I would go with, definitely Mumford and Sons is probably pretty close to my favorite. Arguably my favorite would be Mumford and Sons. What else? Cadis. If you don't know Cadis yet, Caydus. Okay. Cadis is incredible. It's a newer band or a newer group. Anyone who might be aware of Eve Was Framed or Promise and Yucca, that's their music is phenomenal. Okay. Last year they produced a record where the entire record, it's a concept record, the entire thing is an allegory of deconversion. But the allegory is, it's a vampire, it's a woman who's raised in a vampire cult and then realizes that the whole way where she's taught to feed and thrive in life is at the expense of others, right? Vampires. And so having to choose to reject what the nature, I guess, you've been taught, you've been brought up with, in order to find a higher way of living, and denying what you were taught, growing up, whatever. And so it's all an allegory for leaving the faith, okay? For leaving the blood-sucking, venomous, Christianity that we were raised with. And it is just fantastic. So check out Cadus. Beyond that, I don't know. Lots of stuff, I suppose. I'm having a hard time thinking of a third. But I love music. So,
all right. So before we get out of here, where can people check you out at? And do you have anything else coming up that you want to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you are able to, if you're in the Nashville area, or you're able to get to Nashville in July, definitely check out NanoCon. That's short for Nashville Nuns, NANO.
I didn't know that.
Go to NanoCon. Fantastic. It's gonna be a great time. And it's a huge lineup, so you'll get your bang for your buck. They've got everybody speaking in like 20-minute segments, so you can pack in as many little mini talks as possible, and everybody's there. Seth Andrews, just the whole lineup. Like I said, I'm going to be on a panel with Durante Lamar and Dave Warnock. And Dave, if you're a Dave Warnock fan,
Major.
He's been a little behind the scenes for the past year or so. And
he's taking a break.
He's coming back out for this. So, and he lives in the area, so it'll be easy. So definitely try and get to that. Thanks Ways to Human for putting in the chat, both NanoCon and also that's my website. It's more or less a static website. I don't update it or do a whole lot with it. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with that stuff. But nonetheless, that's a good launching point. If you go to my website, drewbekius.com, you can connect to my socials from there, or you can message me directly from that website as well. My socials, pretty simple: Facebook and Instagram, and it's just my name, Drew Bekius, just spelled out one word the way it is. So that's me. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Drew. Well, I've had a great time doing this. Thanks for agreeing to the interview. If you could just stand by for a moment, I'm going to end the show and we'll talk after the show.
Absolutely. That's great.
Thanks for having me. Drew, thank you so much. Thank you to the moderators as well. And I hope, and next Tuesday, I'll be interviewing Glenda Jordan. So check that out. And I hope everyone has a good evening.